Hi, this is Rabbi Chaim Kaufman. Welcome to our 229th installment in the Torah portion of the week. We are holding by Parshas Pinchas. Parshas Pinchas talks about the fact that Pinchas shish kebabs kills Zimri, the son of Salu, and the Midianite woman Kazbi Batsur, daughter of Tsur. He brought peace to God. God made him a Kohen. Speaks about census. Speaks about the count of the Levites, and speaks about the grievance of the daughters of Zelophehad, about inheritance and the laws of inheritance. Then talks about the Tamid, the continued daily offering, etc. So it speaks about Zelophehad, the daughters of Zelophehad. They complain, right? They say, our father died. Why shouldn't we get a portion? In the land of Israel, it's not fair. Why shouldn't we inherit? And what happens? Moshe Rabbeinu inquires of God, and God says, you're right. Etc. About this whole hierarchy of inheritance and how inheritance works, and who gets and who doesn't. But there's an interesting thing. Without getting into the details of inheritance, there is one aspect that I did want to mention, and that is what is an inheritance called in Hebrew? In general, an inheritance is called a Yerusha. Right? The word Yerusha means to inherit, right? I.e. an inheritance. But we know that there is no Yerusha of Torah. What is Yerusha? What do we normally say by inheritance? Possessions, money, property, right? What somebody leaves somebody else. Again, there's a hierarchy. Who's going to get first? Who gets second? Etc. Unless the person puts directly in their will, right? What the order is going to be and who's going to get. So normally when we talk about Yerusha, we talk about something physical, right? We talk something, money, movables, could be land, could be houses, could be any number of things. But what is the Yerusha in spiritual terms? In spiritual terms, we would say that Yerusha means the inheritance of Torah. And now we know, and if you don't know, you'll find out now, that the Torah is not inherited. Well, what do we mean? That the Torah tells me a father has an obligation to teach his sons, right? The Torah has an obligation to teach his daughters, right, as well, to keep whatever they need to keep. But there's an obligation to teach children, right, as we say in the Shema. As we say in the Shema every day. So if that's the case, what happens for whatever reason? A child goes sour. They grow up in the system. They go to the best yeshivas, the best girls' schools, and they peter out. Right? They peter out, so to speak. They're not interested in Torah mitzvahs. They want to shake off the yoke of heaven. Can happen. Right? A number of reasons why. It's not really the purpose of this video. To go through it. The point is, person can give their kids the best education, and their kids could decide it's not for me. They can throw off the yoke of heaven. It can be based on a number of different things. Right? It can happen to the best of families. Now that being said, if the family's religious, grandparents were religious, and their family was religious, and you go back generations, so what happened over here? So what we see is, when a person's born, that's when he has to start to acquire Torah, right? Obviously, they have to grow up, they have to be taught, etc. But just because they have an unbelievable pedigree, right? In other words, they have family, generations, family that, great rabbis, great people, rabbinic scholars, they have an unbelievable pedigree. I remember his mother used to say, genealogy is good. Having a good pedigree is good. It's like adding an extra zero. That's all it is. right? But when someone starts from the beginning, person's born, they grow up. So you can say in a family like that, what are the odds person's going to stay in the right path? Probably pretty good, right? They probably have a very good chance. Why? You got aunts, you got uncles, you got cousins, some more religious, less religious, whatever, but they're all going to the right path, more or less. So the chances of growing up in such a family, we would say exponentially they should go the same way. Now, does that mean it's a guarantee? No. Doesn't mean it's a guarantee. What it means is it's a great start. Right? I don't think there's any question. It's definitely a great start. But the question is what happens in the end. And a person go through any number of experiences and say, I'm not interested anymore. I've had enough, go out on my own, do my own thing. And that's it. And everyone can make their choice. So you see that even in the best of homes, kids can go sour. OTD, what they call off the derech. Right? They don't believe in Torah mitzvahs anymore. And again, it's not the scope of this video to go into all the details why. And it doesn't really matter why. Right? But what we see over here is that just because a person has an impeccable pedigree, that does not guarantee that person's still going to go in the right path. Why not? Because every person has to carve their path out for themselves in Torah. Now, you'll tell me, doesn't every Jew have an obligation to keep Torah mitzvahs? It's true. But not everyone's path is normally the same. You can have kids, grow up in, let's say, a Hasidic home, and instead they become Litvish, Lithuanian. Their outlook is a little bit different. How they dress is different. It's not like they don't keep Torah mitzvahs. But not every path is the same. Which is okay. As long as they're in the right path. As long as they're not veering off. As long as they're going in the right direction, okay? Some people, will become more Hasidic, less Hasidic, non-Hasidic. They might change different customs. As long as they're doing the right thing, they're doing what God wants, there's nothing wrong with it. Definitely nothing wrong with it. But to think that because I have this pedigree, person should never think, well, I can rest on my laurels. I can rest on my forefathers. I don't have to work so hard. Now that can mean we have to work that much more. We have to work that much more. Why? Because we want to fulfill that pedigree. Right? We want to walk into those shoes. Not easy. Right? Because, if someone's just starting out, and they see their father, grandfather way up here, and they say, well, we may never get there, so why bother? Right? That could go through their mind. They could also be demoralized and say, how could I ever reach the level? Reach their level. It could also be an impetus to want to work very hard. Want to uphold the family name. That is certainly worth something. But not everyone can go in the same way. We're not all cookie cutters. If a person fits the system, which we mentioned many times, they thrive in the system, good. Not everyone thrives in the system. Not everybody, is the same. They don't learn the same. Some people are more visual. Some people not. Right? But you cannot hammer somebody into a place where they're not holding. Right? They have to feel comfortable enough, and find and figure out, where they want to fit in. Which way they want to go. They want to be ultra-Orthodox, they want to be Hasidic. If a person's born into a certain type of family, normally that's the way you go. There are some people that veer off. Some people that are not Hasidic become Hasidic. Or vice versa. Right? Not necessarily anything wrong with that. The question is how the family takes it. But, in general, it's not necessarily anything wrong. They're finding their own path. As long as the path is within Torah. Person can't just experiment and, I'll try this, I'll try that, I'll try the other thing, and these things are way outside of Torah. That's a different issue. Right? That is a very different issue. And we have to be careful. We have to be careful because King Solomon says in Proverbs, Hanoch nar al pi darko. You have to educate your child according to whose will? Darko, his will. King Solomon does not say darki. Does not say according to my will. Right? A person has to know their kids. They have to know what they can handle. They have to know where their strengths lie. They have to see also what they can't do. Right? So a person should never send their kid to a school where the kid's not going to fit in. Or the kid's not going to succeed. Right? If you send them to a school scholastically, the child's not holding there. But you want to send them there because it's prestigious. And you got connections, you'll get them in. It's not for you. Right? It's for the sake of the child themselves. So, we may want the best for them in our eyes. But we have to realize it may not be best for them. And the hard thing is, we have to be okay with it. Because at the end of the day, we want our children to be upstanding Orthodox Jews. Now, they may not dress exactly the way we want. They may not have all the time the best Jewish philosophy, meaning the best Jewish outlook. Not meaning they didn't get a proper education. It's just they made certain decisions in which way they want to go. Now, if they make a decision that's outrightly against halacha, okay, that's one thing. If it's within Jewish law, but it doesn't fit our world outlook, i.e. the parents, as long as they're still holding on, they're keeping Torah and mitzvahs, that has to be good enough for us. Now, you may say we live with a lot of disappointments, true? Right? We have certain goals, certain aspirations, certainly for ourselves, for our kids. And if they fall short or they're not, they don't meet them, it's hard. They're going to find a balance. I would say like this, it's better, even if a child becomes something you're really not happy about. But what would you rather have? Right? This is what we would have to ask ourselves. Would you rather have a child who goes totally off? Or would you rather have a child that found their own path to God? That's okay. That is acceptable. Even if it's not the parent's way. The parent doesn't have to live the kid's life. The parent obviously wants the best for them, in physical terms and spiritual terms. But we don't want to lose them. We don't want them to go to the other side. Right? So some people would say, if they're not like this, I'd rather not have them around. Now that's a hard thing. Because what happens? The kid gets rejected. The kid gets rejected by the parents and they know the parents disapprove. The kid may not go not only won't he go in the direction he wants, go in the opposite direction. And we can't say, well, it's better they go off and do their own thing than do this. Right? We never want to lose anybody. We never want to lose any Jew, right, to go off. We want them to stay on the path. The problem is we want them to stay on our path. Or even better than our path. We don't, we're disappointed sometimes if they go in a different path. That's less acceptable. But again, we have to ask ourselves the question. What would you rather have? Them have no connection to Judaism at all? Or have this connection which is keeping them on the straight path? I don't think there's any question. But there are some parents, that are stubborn, foolhardy, and only want what's best for them. And the reality is, we can't run their lives. They won't let us anyway. right? They have to make their own decisions. We can help guide them. If they ask for guidance. At the end of the day, all things being equal, we have to be accepting. Obviously we're talking about where they're not desecrating Shabbos, not intermarried, these other things. Right? Certain things, doesn't matter if they're your kid or not, you have to take a stand. Right? Someone said, what would happen if, your kid, brought home a non-Jew? I said, it's not going to happen. And he said, what would happen if it would happen? He knows what would happen. He'd be ostracized. They're going to say, how could you do that? But he's still your son. Family's family till they intermarry. There will be serious repercussions. Everyone knows. You can't leave your mind open till your brains fall on the floor. There are certain red lines. No matter how nice the person is. We're not talking about that. Talking about what's permitted, what's forbidden, and going beyond. The person goes beyond, they know. They certainly know what the repercussions are. So some people may say, you're a fool. He gets married, has kids, you won't have any connection with the grandkids. Well, if they're intermarried, and the woman is not Jewish, okay, kids aren't Jewish. It's a tragedy. There's no question. But how in the world can you give any credibility to what the person's done? And we have to realize as well, we mentioned many times, person makes a decision, there will be repercussions. For everything we do. Whether in this world, next world, people do not want to own up to what they've done. They don't want anyone telling them what they've done is wrong. Nobody wants to hear that. But you know what? There is right and wrong. How do I know there's right and wrong? Torah tells me. You have to do this, not allowed to do that. There are plenty of things that are right and wrong. And there are things that are obvious. Right? We don't have to mention them because they're so obvious. So a person decides that's what they're going to do. That's how they're going to live their lives. They're going to say, gee, I didn't know you would react such a way. I did not know. How is it possible you didn't know? You're a fool if you didn't know. Parent has to make clear. These are the boundaries. If you step past these boundaries, there'll be repercussions. So some people that may be a good deterrent, other people it may not matter. But in the end, we are responsible for what we do. And some people would say, come on, you'd really break up a family because of who they marry? It's pretty crucial. Because at the end of the day, Torah says many times you're not allowed to marry a non-Jew. It's clear. Right? Most Jews, you would ask them, according to the Bible, yes or no. Is a Jew allowed to marry a non-Jew? No buts, yes or no. They know what the answer is. Then they'll give all kinds of excuses why it's okay. So that's not the question. So if someone does such a thing, what? You're going to look the other way? You're going to say it's okay? So they what? You're going to give them tough love? No. They know the position. They understand the position. It's their choice. And this is exactly the point. That someone can make a choice, a bad choice. But they can make a choice nonetheless. And they have to live with what they do. So you could have, a whole bunch of kids, and some of them toe the line very well, some in the middle, some a little bit to the left. But if they're all intact, you should be very happy. Meaning that they're keeping more or less what the Torah says. But again, not everyone fits the mold. Not everyone's going to do what they should do. And there are ways to try and bring them back and other things. Again, really not the purpose for this. For this video. But I want to make clear. There's no guarantee in any family how a child's going to come out. There's no guarantee you put them in the best schools, best tutors, this, that. They could end up hanging out with the wrong people and just spiral out of control. Can happen. Happen the best of families. So the idea here is about Yerusha, about inheritance. Torah is not an inheritance. Torah, every single person has to fight for their own. They have to carve out the path that's right for them. Right, again, within the parameters of Torah. We're not talking Reform, Conservative, that's outside the parameters. Within the parameters of Torah, there are many directions a person can go. You see, but we have our own direction. We have our own things. So therefore, we want what's best for us. Problem is, we're not our kids. Doesn't matter what we think is best for us. Go back to what King Solomon said. Hanoch hanar alpi, hanoch hanar alpi darko. Educate him according to his path. His path meaning within Torah, not outside of Torah. So that may mean we have to see certain things we don't like. In many different ways. But I would ask again the question, what's the alternative? You try and bang them over the head, doesn't help. They go the other direction. Would you rather them going totally off or still be within a path that's acceptable? And they're still keeping Shabbos and they're still keeping mitzvahs. I think the answer is obvious. But you see, we don't always do the right thing. We are creatures based on emotion. A lot of us based on emotion. Emotion takes over the intellect. Because according to the intellect, we understand this. Makes sense. But there are other issues going on. Pride. Ego. Prestige. How it looks upon the family. These are not small things. I'm not saying they're all right either. The point is, we can't look down on people if we want them to go in the right direction. We have to know how to encourage them, etc. Again, we're not talking where they're going in a totally wrong direction. That I don't have to accept. I don't have to hammer them, but I don't have to accept it. I don't have to say that's a legitimate expression of Judaism. Now, some people say you have to be open-minded. You have to be pluralistic. My Torah doesn't say that. My Torah, in many places, is very black and white. Are there gray areas? Of course. Right? But it's pretty clear. Pretty clear what the goals are, what our obligations are, and all that. So at the end of the day, think once, think twice, think 3 times before your ego or whatever gets in the way. Because if a person's child is basically keeping Torah mitzvahs, they may not be doing everything you do or to that level, but they're still there. You got to be very happy. Because in this generation, anyone who stays religious, it's pretty incredulous. Because of the pull of the street and other things. But again, what's the issue? We get bogged down in what are other people going to think. What are the neighbors going to think? So we should say who cares, but we're caught up in social pressure. We're caught up in how we want to look, how we want to be perceived. Whether it's true or not doesn't matter. And that has to stop. That certainly has to stop. Because the alternative is worse. If they're holding by Torah mitzvahs, be thankful. If they're not doing exactly what you want, it's their own life to live. It's not about our pedigree over here. It's about educating them according to the way they need to be educated. obviously in the proper way of Torah. But once we get our egos involved, logically what we're saying makes sense. Makes perfect sense. But again, you got these other factors involved that take us away from it, and draw people away. And we think, oh, we know better. That you're doing this, you tell them this, you tell them that. You turn them off. Right? We don't want to turn them off. So what if they're not a carbon copy of us? If they are, great. If they're not, we also have to respect it. Right? Even if it doesn't necessarily look good on the outside. Doesn't matter. Right? Absolutely doesn't matter. If they're going in the way of God, they're keeping Torah mitzvahs, we should be happy. I want to remind everyone, I give a class on duties of the heart every Tuesday, 9 o'clock New York time. I have class on the book of Leviticus, chapter 14, every Sunday, 9 o'clock New York time, 4 o'clock Israel time. Tanakh talk every Monday, 9 o'clock Israel time, 2 o'clock Eastern time. I have Pirkei Avos, Ethics of Our Fathers, every Saturday, 2:30 Eastern time, 9:30 Israel time. I have conversion classes. Anyone interested in any of this, find me on Facebook, Beyond Orthodox Conversion to Judaism. You can send me an email, rabbichaimkoffman@gmail.com, RABBICHAIMCOFFMAN @gmail.com.